Hey, real quick, I know the building was cleaned this weekend really well. Anybody who's missing a Bible, notebook, or whatever, go down this hall and look on the table. There's been a few of us already down there this morning. Good morning, everybody. Well, I see y'all came back, so I must not have done that bad. Is Scott gone now to Cuba? Is he in Cuba? He is, okay. 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 I knew he had a trip, I just didn't know exactly when it was. They need to be able to hear me, but now I can hear me. Okay. Well, I hope they have a good trip. Get a lot accomplished down there. Oh, wow. Did y'all hear that? 7 baptisms in Cuba this week. That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. Okay, so in our text today, we're still in Jerusalem, and that's how we're going to finish out this quarter. But today's lesson was titled The Final Hours. So this is leading up to the crucifixion. We don't actually get to the crucifixion until next week, but this is leading up to it. I'm going to start with Matthew 26, verses 1 through 5. It says, "Now it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, that he said to his disciples, 'You know that after 2 days is the Passover, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified.' Then the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders of the people assembled at the palace of the high priest, who was called," y'all help me with that one, "Caiaphas." Okay. I was just checking to make sure y'all were paying attention. "Who was called Caiaphas, and plotted to take Jesus by trickery and kill him. But they said, 'Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people.'" So, when we read this first section here, we're talking about just a couple of days before. So this is like 2 days before. So we're looking at what, Tuesday? I'm sorry. This is like Tuesday. Leading up to the crucifixion on Friday. Verse 2 reads, "You know that after 2 days is the Passover." So that would be Wednesday and Thursday, right? Those 2 days would be Wednesday and Thursday. And then the Passover, obviously, or the day that they're referring to then, obviously, would be the Friday. So when he says they were meeting together, then the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders and the people assembled at the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and plotted to take Jesus by trickery. What are we talking about there when we say taken by trickery? by deception. It wasn't what? Say that again, a little louder. They're trumped up charges, right? So they weren't legitimate charges. Okay, so there were trumped up charges, and I think we'll talk about that probably a little more next week as we get into the crucifixion. Uh, right. So one of my study guides, actually, one of my personal study guides, not the text here, says that it was done subtly, like you're talking about, at night, kind of on the sly, and was not to be, the arresting of him was not to be a big spectacle. It was almost like they were trying to slip in and do it. Okay, then we continue on, and we're in verses 17 through 25. It says, "Now on the first day of the feast of the unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying to him, 'Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?' And he said, Go into the city of a certain man, and say to him, The teacher says, My time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.' So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. When evening had come, he sat down with the 12. Now as they were eating, he said, Assuredly, I say to you, one of you will betray me. And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and each of them began to say to him, Lord, is it I? He answered and said, He who dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me. The Son of Man indeed goes as it is written of him, but woe to the man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born." Then Judas, who was betraying him, answered and said, "Rabbi, it is I." He said to him, "You have said it." So there in verse 17 where we started, he tells them to go into the city, in verse 18, he tells them to go into the city and see a certain man. He does not tell them who that is. He does not tell us who that is. But it goes back to I think it goes back to the relationship that the disciples and Jesus had. They knew that when they went to that city looking for that person, they would know when they were there. Sir? Right. We talked about that a little last week, but we'll jump back to that because anybody in here that's ever dealt with livestock knows that the young ones are not wanting to be ridden. It takes a period of time before you can ride an animal. And to go get a young donkey and get on it and ride off, 2 or 3 seconds, yes. They made an entire sport out of trying to do that for 8 seconds, didn't they? But yeah, I think this is kind of the same scenario. Is it's going to play out. And I know play out is kind of a bad choice of words there, but it's going to unfold as necessary, and to show the divine intervention of what is going on. Every individual that is in that process understand. They might not understand the entire process, but they understand their portion of it. Well, if I understand correctly, each of them kind of asked that same question. Is it I? Right? But Judas knew it was. Judas knew he. Yeah. Let's read that verse. And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and each of them began to say to him, Lord, is it I? Right? So each one of them asked that question, but if I'm the guilty party, and Mike says, is it me? And I say, is it me? And Zach says, is it me? You would think, if I'm the guilty party, either I'm a really good liar, or it's going to maybe sort of be evident that Mike's asking, is it him, not knowing. And I'm going to have a little inflection in my voice or something that's going to say, hey, it could be me. Right, I'm getting to that. So if for that not to occur, okay, for every one of them to say, is it I? And nobody to go, hey, wait a minute. Steve was the one that you could tell he was guilty. You could tell it was him. You could hear it in his voice. You never hear any of that. You don't hear any discussion of, hey, I think it was him, or I think it was him. Right. Yes. Right. So when everybody says, is it I? Then he tells who it's going to be. That's what I was fixing to read, is whoever dips his hand in the bowl with me. So to kind of understand that, that's not a time period when you had a spread like Jennifer would throw where everybody's got a plate, a bowl, a cup, a saucer, and all that good stuff. For some meals, you actually have like common bowls and literally dip your hand in. Okay, kind of like the bread basket sort of set up. And there must have only been one person that dipped their hand at the same exact time that Jesus did, because that was a great way for him to say, and I know it was a great way because Jesus said it. So it had to be a great way, right? He who dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me. So he just told everybody who it was. He just told everybody who it was. John, you had a comment? Right. Yeah, and in a typical gathering, it's highly possible that nobody would be like, "Hey, man, you brushed hands with Jesus," reaching in the bowl, because these were people that were with him every day. These were people with him. We would have a whole different look on that if he showed up today and one of us was sitting here and we dipped our hand in the bowl at the same time, because everybody would be watching every little move he made. But these were guys that were with him all the time. Well, my in the commentary that I'm reading also, it goes on to that point, and it says that they assume at that point, and then I've heard another person speak the same thing, that a preacher that I've been around several times, but say that they think at that point he would have excused himself from yeah. I think it's a little later in this one he tells them all that. I don't Judas specifically. Yeah. But to John's point, it may not have identified him to absolutely everyone. But, if we had something that occurred and Butch, you and I did something at the same time, and then it's called out that way, we're going to know that. But it strikes me that Judas tries to play along like he doesn't know what's going on. Right, the two of them know what's going on. So then our text, I don't understand why this text skips verses 26 through 35. Okay, I do not. So we're going to go ahead and read those. This is the institution of the Lord's Supper. That's the verses that the text skips here. It says, "Now as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and after blessing it, broke it, and gave it to the disciples, and said, 'Take, eat, this is my body.' And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, 'Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink of it again. I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. It also covers those few verses that they left out. Also covers the foretelling of Peter's denial. I'm sorry. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, "You will all fall away because of me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." Peter answered him, "Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away." Jesus said to him, "Truly, I tell you, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, "Even if I must die with you, I will not deny you." And all the disciples said the same. Now, on that, it kind of makes me wonder, is Peter saying that the same as Judas? I know I'm going to deny you, but I'm going to play it off as if I'm not. Or does he truly not know? And I'm of the opinion, now this is first opinion of Audibly, okay, so take it for what it's worth. I'm of the opinion that the 2 different discussions are just that, they're different. Judas is basically trying to say, it's not going to be me, when he says, "Is it I?" But Peter is, because he's trying to put up a false front, I guess is the way to say it. I truly think that Peter does not realize that in the next little while he is going to deny Christ 3 times. Right. You know, and I think it's easy for all of us to say, "I won't deny Christ." I think it's very easy for us to say. But if you're in one of those martyr type situations and a gun is put to your head, I don't think any of us know exactly what we would do at that moment. And I think that's kind of what I think that's kind of where Peter's at right now is, I'm strong enough in my faith that I'm not going to deny Christ, but he's not put in that situation yet. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that would be easy to do. John, you had a comment? Mm-hmm. I'm sure they were. Right. We have a very unfair advantage over them. We have the end of the story, right? And it's easy to look and say, well, I don't know why they would have thought that, because this is what happens. They didn't have that. Correct. Correct. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So let's pick up with our text there, starting in verse 36. I'm going to read 36 to 46. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, "Sit here while I go and pray over there." And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, So who would that be? James and John. And he began to sorrowful and deep, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me. He went a little farther and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping and said to Peter, What, could you not watch me 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Again, a second time he went away and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples, and he said to them, Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. So we're going to kind of walk through this a little bit. We already talked about who the sons of Zebedee are. So again, one of my commentaries there say that they had left from where they did the Lord's Supper. So they think Judas is already gone. Jesus takes 3 people with him, and those 3 just happen to be what? The absolute closest people to him. Okay? And he goes and he prays. And in verse 39, it says, He went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. What cup is he talking about there? Is it the same as in Matthew 20, verse 22? When Jesus answers a question, he said, You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink? They said to him, We are able. And he said to them, You will drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left hand is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father. So the cup that he's talking about there is what? The cup of wrath. And that is the wrath of God for sin of everybody that has ever lived, right? And if you'll notice in verse 39, he asks that, Can you let this cup pass from me? Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. I do believe that that is the human side of Jesus asking very simply, is there any other way? Is there any other way? He understands what's going to take place, but I believe that's where we see the human side of him saying, is there any other way? Then drop down just a couple of verses, and the second time he goes and prays, and he says it again. O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done. So that's twice that he's asking the same thing, right? Then we drop down just a couple of more verses to 44, and it says, He went again and prayed the third time, saying the same words. That's 3 times that he's approached God asking, is there any other way? What kind of message does that send to us? We're going to chase a little rabbit here. What kind of... Okay. What's that? The human side of him I think scared would be a soft word to use in that situation. I think he was truly terrified. I think he was truly terrified. He asked that same exact prayer 3 times. But in each of those, and we know the third one, while it doesn't give us the words, it says he said it again, okay? So I think it's safe to say that in all 3 of those, he says, not my will, but your will be done. Okay? Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's not like he's saying, oh, I mean, as a human, we would say, oh, Steve, you just going to give me your sins to add on to mine? You know? Well, that's just a few more than what I already had. That's not the situation here. And we will definitely approach that a little more next week. How many of y'all have ever had an illness, a family member with an illness, or anything like that, that you just constantly prayed over? It wasn't like you said a prayer for this one thing and you let it go. You just keep on praying for it. I think we can all say at some point in our lives we've been there. Okay, I know there's several people in this room that I've had personal discussions with about doing that. You know, that Betty Wallace told me a while back that she's constantly praying for my mother. Okay? That's one of those things that this lesson, and I think we glaze over it, okay, because what we're studying on here is betrayal. We're studying on the fact that Jesus is fixing to be crucified. When you pull those 3 verses out and read them, what you see is even Jesus prayed in repetition. You know, that it's okay for us to, because oftentimes I think we do, especially when we talk with kids, is we say, well, you prayed for that. You know, kind of like we talked last week when we chased a rabbit. Same rabbit this week. When we chased that rabbit last week about how kids pray for things that we don't think we would bother God with. But I think often we kind of want to dampen children's prayers sometimes because they've already prayed for that. But we see here that Jesus did that. He prayed repeatedly for the same thing. Correct. It wasn't like he got into a prayer and just got long-winded. He purposely set himself apart 3 separate times to pray that God's will be done, but if there's any other way, let it pass from him. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. There's a Garth Brooks song that says some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. I think if you're going to have an unanswered prayer that was God's greatest gift, I think it would be that one right there of God didn't say, well, maybe we can go a different path. The plan was laid out. The plan was executed. Jesus asked 3 separate times if there was any other way. And the answer was no. To his own son, yes. Any other questions or comments? We're out a couple of minutes early, but the kids will be dismissing soon. No other questions or comments? All right. Right, right, yeah. When they had the reverse auction on, can we say? Yes, right. Yeah. It was another one of those he already knew the answer. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Any other comments? Butch, would you dismiss us with a prayer, please?